I'd just like to welcome everybody to the 2021 Wildfire Safety Summit, the Butte County Fire Safe Council. This last summer, everybody was very attentive on watching all the fires burn in Northern California. It was definitely a fire season year. I'd just like to say, I hope that everybody stays safe and enjoys the meeting. And with that, we'll go ahead and kick it off.
All right, good morning, everyone. We look forward to the time together. We're going to be having some Q&A after each presentation. And so feel free to get your questions lined up. We're going to kick it off with a little review of the action plan and some things that the Fire Council has to offer. We'll roll into Taylor's presentation with wildfire recovery. Jim Hotman will talk about our biomass progress. Ms. Wolfie Rugel will bring to light some of the progress that we've had with prescribed fire in our Fire Forward Future section. And Jeff Gould will be sharing the good news of grazing for fuels reduction. And then Chief Sholin will be giving us some insights into the Dixie Fire. We'll conclude and look forward to sharing the time. All right, starting things off here. My name is Kelly Jean Deanda. I'm the Executive Director of our wonderful Community Grassroots Fire Safe Council. And today, in light of our mission, which is to provide wildfire education, mitigation, and recovery, we want to share with you some key topics. So I'd like to just touch on some parts of the WUI action plan. We'll be going over forest health and what we've been doing for fuels projects in the past and what's upcoming, looking at other just fuels reduction in the wildland-urban interface, the forest management plans, and where we're at with some CEQA progress, as well as continued needs. For Firewise Education, we'll talk a little bit about the Firewise USA communities and Fire Council activities. We'll be looking at what Wildfire Ready Raccoon has been up to and the media campaign that was launched this summer, as well as a new innovative Red Eye Jedi multi-generational learning tool, and the Wildfire in the Foothills student sixth grade curriculum, as well as the Forest Health Guidebook. We'll end on a tiny note of funding gaps before Taylor kicks things off. And so for our pre and post fire WUI action plan, this is a concept that we launched last year, just about this time, in light of the North Complex. And the hope here is to address the amount of acres that have been burned both catastrophically and low intensity, but more than that, the impact to our communities and setting up a framework to be proactive. So looking at a collaborative approach, how we can continue to do forest thinning treatments and home hardening, and how education can be a mix. So that WUI action plan is addressing these core planning areas that we have, such as Cohasset, Forest Ranch, Paradise Ridge, Conco, Yankee Hill, etc. And in those areas, we want to be looking at our fire return interval, kind of organizing within those planning areas, and then really getting projects tacked down, building on the past. So the framework for that action plan is protecting life, property, watersheds, as well as helping in wildfire containment. And this past season, Wade Killingsworth, our GIS specialist, has been helping to get some of those metrics down in a map format. And so one of the things that we could see here with Berry Creek and Forbstown in the legend is projecting kind of what the overall planning area is in acres, what the units are within that, where the federal lands are, and then what the fire return interval might be at different locations. And then at the very bottom, we can see how many structures are in the planning area. In this case, Berry Creek, we don't know right now. We don't have real good granular data on that, how many parcels there are, and just kind of looking at how we can start building a cohesive plan in each of these regions. These are some maps that reflect a community presentation that the RCD, NRCS, and the Fire Council joined in on for Cohasset. The map on the right shows a collective of different community efforts and agency efforts in Cohasset to improve wildfire safety. And so we have roadside projects and safety zones, mastication, residence assistance programs, chipping, My Sierra Woods, all represented on one map. And we also have the same for Forest Ranch. And these are the types of things we look forward to sharing more of in 2022, but they're a nice way to look at our collective efforts of all the partnerships involved. And this is our poster that many of you have seen before that we launched right before the Campfire, the Fire Council's expansion into helping with forest health. And each of these areas represents a community that has a lot of different needs, and we'll take a peek at what's happening with those forests right now. So we have had the opportunity to work on projects that we undertook in Magalia on Doe Mill and Garland, as well as a lot of My Sierra Woods program, which is a partnership through American Forests and CAL FIRE funding. And that's been able to really help a lot of the forest density in Magalia. In Foresttown, we were successful working along roads in partnership with Public Works and CAL FIRE's 4535 project. Cohasset, we also were able to do extensive roadside fuels reduction and a lot of residence assistance. In Paradise, we will be hearing more about that from Taylor, but we had some great mastication work done in the Blue Oak Homeowners Association Lower Paradise, and then also a lot of work on the West Branch. In Forest Ranch, we've been working on the Chico Creek project with Big Chico Creek Ecological Reserve, as well as roadside work with the Forest Ranch Fire Safe Council. Here's just a sample project. This was the Palatine Doe Mill that we just discussed, and this starts off the edge of Skyway on Doe Mill and heads down to Butte Creek. Just a beautiful project for anyone who's up in that neck of the woods and wants to get some off-road travel going. And what we have upcoming in 2022, we will be working on the Forest Health Grant. As the map on the left shows, the blue parcels are areas in Cohasset and Magalia, also in Foresttown. There'll be a wide variety of stakeholders and partners working on this grant, including the Butte County Resource Conservation District and Big Chico Ecological Reserve, as well as Chico State and component for biomass. On the right is our Foresttown project, and that is extending work that's been done by CAL FIRE's CCI grants around the Mary Mountain Village, and we'll be extending more biomass chipping out into the landscape. This is the project funded by Sierra Nevada Conservancy for Big Chico Creek Watershed in that partnership, which is an extension to forest management plan and environmental documentation and other S&C implementation grants that are underway. So as far as other fuels reduction, we have this past year had enough funding to support about 452 chipper requests all throughout Butte County. We've been able to help 60 residents with fuels reduction clearing through grants, primarily Cohasset and Magalia Paradise. And for fuels treatments that we just discussed for past projects, we were able to accomplish almost 1,000 acres this year. So collectively, we're well up into over 1,000 acres of all those types of treatments combined. But as we know, and the point of having an action plan is to set a metric that we can increase the pace and scale to get more acres on the ground and get out ahead of these catastrophic fires. To help with that process of designing projects and educating the community on forest health, we've had the fortune to create 3 forest management plans, one in progress. So Cohasset Forest Management Plan is available to view and to use. We'll be hoping to have print copies to distribute throughout the community. but right now it's in an online story map format. The Paradise Forest Management Plan is also an online story format, and we'll have some print copies for that as well. And Big Chico Creek's Forest Management Plan is underway. In order to create projects, we have the requirement of CEQA when we're using state funds. And so what we've been able to accomplish this year is about 6,000 acres of environmental review for Cohasset with a notice of exemption. And that was funded by Campfire and Sierra Nevada Conservancy. For Mount Ida, which is the region in Oroville, depicted on the map on the right, that project area is about 8,900 acres that we're able to do in preparation for roadside fuels and residents assistance. Lower Paradise, you'll be hearing from Taylor with our vegetation management plan that's in progress, which is quite exhaustive. And then for the town of Paradise, we're partnering with them on a mitigated negative declaration for 14,000 acres in the town's footprint that will help support grazing and other future fuels needs. So now we're going to switch into Firewise Education. And we know that as soon as we cut the brush, it starts to grow back. And so we need the dual approach of helping educate people and helping them to be successful, as well as providing fuels or services. And in this case, we have the great fortune of Lauren DeTerra joining our team to lead out our Firewise Communities program. And on this map on the left, you can see a wide variety of those blocked out zones where we have Firewise designation. And this is a historic photo of Berry Creek Community Park before the fire last year. But what we'll be talking about throughout the year of 2022 is the Firewise Committee. That's a support group for anybody who likes to volunteer on behalf of their community for Firewise. And we hope that if you're not part of the Firewise Committee, that you would consider joining. It's a great group of people. Right now we're meeting by Zoom monthly. Wildfire Ready Raccoon has a new mascot image. Here you can see here that we launched with the Be Ready Butte campaign, partnership with Campfire. And in that campaign, we were able to do billboards, radio, television commercials, and a wide variety of social media. And in that we had what we call impressions, 10 million impressions. So we hope that people are really saturated with messaging. The Be Ready Butte campaign drove them to our website to get tips and information about home hardening and evacuation preparedness and all sorts of safety. Next. We also formed a youth education committee in 2021, and it's really gone viral in the sense that we have folks. It originally was for Butte County, but all across Northern California, and now California Fire Safe Council heavily engaged. And in that, we're able to address a lot of different topics. And so if you have an interest in youth education for fire safety and natural resources, this is a great dynamic group of folks to join in on once a month on some really nice topics. This year, we also had the opportunity to work with Miriam Morrell, who had been a community member in Butte County and recently retired from her federal fire service career. And she has created a learning tool that's based on fire observation in the landscape, and it involves nature observation as well as drawing and journaling. And so Miriam's tool is going to be available the first of the year. We're at the final review phases. It's very comprehensive and very exciting. So we'll look forward to sharing more about that. Our Wildfire and the Foothills Curriculum has been updated, and we have the entire resource packet on the website. There are all sorts of new graphics and video content for teachers. We hope in 2022 to get a few pilot teachers to take on the program. And we're just really excited that this legacy of a program that was started in 2005 and it's impacted thousands of kids' lives in teaching them about wildfire safety is updated to a digital format. And the Forest Health Guidebook, a wonderful partnership with our local resource conservation district, is available. We've distributed just about 20,000 copies with the Fire Safe Council, RCD, and other partner teams. And now that it's cooled off a bit, we'll kind of wait and then launch those again this summer. We have a total of 50,000 copies, and this was a really special project funded by our U.S. Forest Service Resource Advisory Council, and we're so fortunate to be able to produce this booklet. It's fun. And wrapping things up here with funding gaps, there has been so much good, but we really do need to continue moving forward in this action plan and vision of helping with fuels and education, home hardening, and so many needs. We know that fire recovery is extremely costly, and the more we can do at this phase of education and prevention, the better. So the North Complex footprint overall has a huge funding need, especially for Feather Falls and Berry Creek in those zones where homes have been, and we have so many dead and dying trees. CEQA, we're making strides, but we have a lot of need to get shovel-ready projects ahead of the grant cycles. And of course, funding a biomass facility is imperative. We'll hear more about that from Jim. And then the chipper program is so widely used throughout the county, and it's such an important resource. We do have very limited funds on that, and we'll be looking to the next grant writing cycles to support that. But it's always a top priority program and underfunded. And then, of course, tree removal, both in burn zones and outside of burn zones like Magalia, Upper Magalia, are really in dire need of tree removal funding. So we'll continue to look for partners and funding opportunities to help our communities and help our forests. And with that, I will conclude and say, we hope that you continue to stay tuned and join us in our vision to create communities in this landscape that are resistant and resilient to the devastating impacts of wildland fire, and consider becoming a member of the Fire Safe Council. I will turn it over to Taylor.
Thanks, Kelly. I just want to remind everyone that if they have any questions, you can type them in the chat, because we do have time for a quick Q&A after every presentation. So feel free to do so. And I'll hop into wildfire recovery efforts that the Fire Safe Council is working on. So today I'm going to be mostly focusing on our post-fire recovery efforts, which are helping implement our action plan in the North Complex footprint and in the Campfire footprint. So the first program that I want to highlight, which is helping folks with their recovery efforts, is focusing, this map is focusing on the Campfire footprint, and it's through our no-cost chipper service, as Callie noted before. And on the right on the map, to give you a reference, all the little yellow dots within the town of Paradise and Magalia are where our chipper service has assisted residents. And it's a great map that shows the visual of how widespread and important this program is. And through those residents within the Campfire footprint, we've been able to help or assist with fuel reduction on approximately 683 acres since 2019, which was when this grant was funded. Since the North Complex, we've been able to chip on 33.5 acres, and this program is still available and funded with that funding. Additional funding still needed, but at the moment we do have the funding available. So if folks do want to sign up, they can go to our website or call our office. So taking a closer look at our Campfire recovery efforts, our tree removal within the Campfire planning started January of 2019. The initial location that we targeted, which is this map, is land adjacent to Magalia Reservoir and then below the dam on POA and PID land. This was identified as a huge need for tree removal, and it's approximately 194 acres. And these trees were removed, and the funding that was, or the revenue that was produced by the trees is being utilized for restoration. And part of that restoration process was this year we replanted on 194 acres. And we are in the planning process of maintaining those seedlings so that they have the success of regrowing safely at proper spacing. So taking a look at kind of the story over the years since the campfire of how our focus has shifted with tree removal. Initially, we started after the work around Magalia Reservoir, we started targeting and aggregating neighborhoods for tree removal. So this was in Magalia and Paradise, and it was through our Campfire grant in 2019. And that moved through 2020, which was when Butte Strong assisted us with additional funding for tree removal, which we continued to focus on neighborhoods and then started to shift our focus on protecting standing or rebuilt structures. So removing trees around those structures. At that point, the government program had kicked in, and so the need shifted again to more individual trees that were threatening structures on adjacent parcels, which was when we started dipping into Paradise Rotary Foundation for tree removal. And at that time as well, we were wrapping up our tree removal in Concow, which Butte Strong had assisted with as well. And that's where we find ourselves today, is continuing to assist with tree removal that for trees that are threatening those structures that are being rebuilt or are standing. And we to date have removed 30,000 plus hazard trees and protected a total of 301 structures. So taking a look at some of the details on our Rotary program, we initially had in our first round of funding 4,000 per site, which helped cover a fair amount of trees, completing 40 sites and removing 335 hazard trees. And this gives you a good image of some of the work that was completed. And then in our phase 2 of funding, the funding per site dropped. So it became more of a cost share program, but we're seeing success with it just because the number of trees have dropped and it's more individual trees that are needing to be removed. And throughout this program, we've utilized 4 local ridge contractors. So taking a look at fuels reduction projects that we have planned within the Campfire footprint. Right now, we're working on a Dry Creek fuels reduction project for about 75 acres. And our plan with these projects, which is something that we've been working on and we're excited to implement, is management of these projects once they're complete with grazing. So this map on the left shows Dry Creek, which has Pearson, and then the most of the work is going to be completed along Stearns. And once that's done, we will have goats and sheep come in and graze for maintenance. And then what we're happily calling the Sky Dog project is more fuels reduction between Skyway and Dogtown, where the government program stopped, and there's still a large need identified to reduce that fuel loading and remove hazard trees. And again, that will be followed up with grazing. And that project is planned for roughly 50 acres. So as Callie mentioned, within the Campfire footprint, also funded by a CCI grant and in partnership with Cal Fire, we have been assisting Cal Fire with the landowner outreach for a vegetative management program, which is the South Paradise VMP. And as you can see in the map, we've outlined rough units of where we would like to see prescribed fire. And outside of that is treatment that is planned for mastication or hand-cut chip, hand-cut pile burn, and grazing. So this program is actually implemented by Cal Fire, and so through our partnership, the Fire Safe Council is helping with the landowner outreach. And at this point, the total project area is roughly 8,500 acres. And so far, we've been able to sign up 5,500 acres of landowners. And so we're still encouraging landowners. At this point, we're nearing the end of when we can sign folks up. But if you do know of anyone within that project boundary, we are still encouraging them to reach out to see if they might be able to participate. And it is an ambitious project and we're really excited about it. So ideally, our environmental documentation and review will be completed by next year, and we'll be able to start implementing. Taking a closer look at our Paradise Forest Management Plan, as Callie highlighted earlier. This Paradise Forest Management Plan is different from our other forest management plans, and it's a plan towards sustained recovery. So it's taking a look at the reality that we're facing post-Campfire. And all of the forest management plans are really a pleasure to stroll through on the website, and they are interactive. So you can see what upcoming plans the Fire Safe Council has for Paradise, and learn about tools that landowners can use on their own land to maintain it for fire safety. So I strongly encourage anyone who would like to visit that forest management plan. And one note as well, Lauren is putting the links to many of the things that we're mentioning, like the Paradise Forest Management Plan, in the chat. So you can access those there and click on them, and they will bring you to the link. So our recovery efforts also quickly shifted to the North Complex footprint, focusing more narrowly on Berry Creek wildfire recovery through a CCI grant that we had funded for that area. So when the North Complex fire of 2020 happened, our CCI grant that we had for Berry Creek was planned for fuels reduction before the fire, and we were nearing implementation of that grant when the fire happened, and we couldn't get to it before the fire. So we shifted our focus to recovery efforts and started with tree removal adjacent to standing structures and structures that were being planned to be rebuilt. And so far, we've been able to complete 38 sites of hazard tree removal where trees are threatening those structures, as you can see in the picture. And through that program, one of our staff members, Matt Woolley, was assisting with the hazard tree felling in partnership with the contractor. And we removed 575 hazard trees over 12 inches DBH through that program, assisting those landowners. And this gives you a good image of some of the work that was completed through by our staff member and our contractors. We had a great field tour with CAL FIRE last month, taking a look at a potential fuels reduction project adjacent to the community of Lake Madrone. And our plan is actually to extend what's visible on the map up to the backsides of the homes within the community to put together a 30-acre project of fuels reduction and hazard tree removal for community protection. In addition to that, we're taking a look as the dynamic shift within the North Complex footprint with all the moving pieces up there of the government program and PG&E doing hazard tree removal. We are constantly adjusting our plans to identify the need. And right now we're taking a look at private roads where there is the most structure density to start hazard tree removal along those roads to protect those residents as they're moving in and out of their homes. So moving forward, we still, as Callie mentioned, there's still an immense need, even within the Campfire footprint within the town of Paradise alone. The government tree removal program removed a significant amount of hazard trees, but we know that there are a lot remaining, as well as our regrowing fields that we are worried about and want to address. And it ties back into our action plan of setting our goals and meeting those in terms of fuels reduction and tree removal. And that really is our planning process at this point, looking for more funding to continue the work that we're doing. And one of those key processes to take care of that material will be biomass. So at this point, I'll take any questions if there are any in the chat. And if not, then I will pass it on to Jim.
We got 2 questions about replanting. If you know how many seedlings were planted and what type of seedlings were planted.
So there were approximately 26,000 seedlings planted, and they were planted at 20-foot spacing, which is the optimal spacing that we like to see in our fuels reduction projects. And so we want to make sure that we're planning for the future correctly with that replanting. And then we had trouble with ordering seedlings when we did. And so we are looking at ponderosa pine, and Douglas fir as the species that were replanted. But I will note that there's a significant amount of oak that's resprouting. So we are working with our forester right now on a plan to make sure that we encourage that oak to regenerate as well. And I think we're looking at mostly a majority of black oak. So we'll still have that mixed conifer diversity. And that's where we're moving forward at this point. All right, Jim, I'm going to pass it on to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Taylor. Appreciate it very much. And I do want to thank both Butte Strong and Campfire grant and AQMD for the grants that have allowed me to work on the biomass program to this date. Next slide. So, you know, there's a lot of ways to figure out what we're working on, and we've tried to look at every aspect of that. And I've tried to verse myself in all these different ways that we can use some of this biomass, because there's not one solution that can fix everything. It's a multitude of solutions. And so you'll see there on the left, hydrogen, renewable natural gas, drop-in fuels, which means like converting wood to gas and diesel and aviation fuels. And then also, how do we use some of this timber that is coming out of our forest for, you know, other products that are available. And then lastly, electrical generation. And what I really try to do is look at different scales of these models, because, you know, there's an opportunity to put in a small biomass facility, say in Forest Ranch, and you can take green waste and material from the community and produce power during PSPS and always have it going into the grid. So there's a lot of opportunities like that. There's opportunities for biochar and, you know, many different things. So I've really tried to be educate myself in all those things. Next slide. And so one of the reasons that we've looked at these projects and focused primarily on hydrogen is because there's a lot of state studies that have been done to figure out, you know, what we want to do. Is Getting to Neutral was put out by Lawrence Livermore National Lab, the California Wildfire and Resilient Action Plan, the Joint Institute for Wood Innovations was part of a study group of what we do with all this material. So there's a lot of different people and state agencies working at this, and to try to come up with different opportunities that fit into what the state's trying to do, which fits into what the federal government's trying to do, and how do we be the leader to make some of these things happen. Next slide. Early on in this process, Jim Brashears gave a great quote we put up on our board, and I thought I'd use it here because historic events create historic opportunities. And that's really what we're looking at. You know, how do we be forward-facing, positive in light of all the wildfire activity that we've had? How do we be leaders in our communities to produce resilient communities? And how do we capitalize and monopolize or make sure that we are good stewards of our communities and our forests? Next slide. So what are the companies that we've looked into and have been partnering with? And I'll preface this by saying there's two different companies that we've mainly focused on. Both of them are producing either hydrogen and a renewable natural gas, but they are working with different state agencies and moving forward and to create projects. The Fire Safe Council has partnered with them they both apply for CEC grants. SGH2 has not heard yet what their outcome is. The other company that I'll focus on in a minute, Yosemite Clean, did not get the grant, but they were very close to getting it. It doesn't mean it's not a viable project. It just means part of their grant application didn't meet what the state was looking at. So this is a kind of a scale. This is from SGH2 Energy. They are currently in process of putting in a facility in Lancaster, California, to use municipal solid waste, mostly organics and wood cardboard to make hydrogen. They have an offtake agreement with a Japanese company called Awatani, who has fueling stations in California, about 20 to date. They plan on putting another 40 fueling stations in next year. So the Lancaster facility would be producing renewable green hydrogen for their fueling stations in Southern California. And if they put a facility in Butte County, it would be supplying hydrogen to fueling stations in Northern California. Next slide. Just some of the information on here. And if anybody wants to know more, I have some good packets that I could email people of what they're really trying to do. SGH2 does plasma technology, plasma gasification, which basically breaks down all the materials into their organic or components, and then takes that gasification process and turns it mostly into hydrogen. It is, they will be capturing the carbon and transporting it down to Bakersfield to store underground. They can operate on a 15-acre site, but they're currently looking at purchasing a 40-acre location. We had a field trip with the CEO of SGH2 to a location in Butte County, and working with a landowner just became too costly for that piece of property. So we've looked at another location, and we're in process of doing some possible lot line adjustments and securing 40 acres there. Part of the process is for me, as the Fire Safe Council, is helping them be the local agency to help contact the people that are here. This facility is about 120 tons a day, which is 42,000 tons a year. And they're going to be producing 100% green hydrogen. The scary part of the process is a $135 million project. So we are also helping them look for grants and providing them information for grants and helping them locate private funding as well. Next slide. Part of the process was I was able to go down to Lancaster. They had a big signing there with Awatani, the city of Lancaster, Chart Industries, which is the trucking firm that makes these cylinders, the company that makes the cylinders for the vehicles. Who else was there? A lot of other industry leaders that are in this process. This truck is from the Port of Los Angeles and or Port of Long Beach, and it is 100% zero emissions based on, it drives on hydrogen, and those are hydrogen tanks similar to what they would be transporting the hydrogen in from Butte County. Again, some of the things that I'd like to point out is that it is a closed loop system. There's not a lot of toxins that are emitted. There's no ash or other hazardous waste. It is a green process. Their slogan is "They're greener than green." So they are taking woody biomass, converting it into hydrogen, capturing the carbon, and so their carbon intensity scores way down. Most of the fuel, the hydrogen they'll be producing, ideally will be used for transportation moving forward to be able to help them have fueling stations in all of California. They also, interestingly enough, want to, Awatani is, like I said, a Japanese corporation. They want to create a sister city with the town of Paradise and the city of Fukushima in Japan. Both cities are rebuilding after large natural disasters, and Awatani wants to help these communities join together in the hydrogen economy. Next slide. The next company that we're working with is Yosemite Clean Energy. They've done some announcements. They have a facility located in, or a site secured in Oroville, and it's about 30 acres. And they have multiple local partners already that has wood to bring to facility. And what we're trying to do is make sure that the Fire Safe Council has the ability to bring some of their material to Yosemite's clean facility as well. They're making renewable natural gas and hydrogen. Next slide. Their slogan is "From stump to pump." They have other locations that they want to put material into, but they're looking at forest waste and ag waste as their prime product. And they, like I said, will be producing hydrogen and renewable natural gas. Next slide. A little bit about their process. They use a dual bed gasification, which basically that heats up it's like about the size of peas, and it's a ceramic material that gets heated up that turns the material into a syngas. That flue gas, the byproduct comes off there, it goes back into the system and gets reburned. So they're getting the most amount of hydrogen and natural gas out of the product. They turn that into a syngas. Then they have a system that separates that syngas into both renewable natural gas and green hydrogen. Both facilities will be using some of their byproduct heat to create their own power. So there's not a large draw on the power grid. There will be both facilities need some natural gas to get their facilities going. But once that happens, they create their own heat and their own energy for the majority of their projects. Next slide. 31,000 kilos of renewable natural gas and 12,000 kilos of hydrogen a day. They will be trucking this material to an offsite, and to date, they are still working on their offtake agreements for both their renewable natural gas and their hydrogen, but they have some things very close to signing. Some dates there of what their plant ideas. They're calling Oroville their flagship project. They have 4 others on the horizon that they're looking to do, but they're trying to get both of these off the ground. So for SGH2, their flagship is going to be that Lancaster facility, and the Butte County facility would be a sister to that, same basic layout. A little bit different for SGH2, they will be liquefying the hydrogen to transport. That way they're reducing their amount of trucks hauling the hydrogen away. I don't think Yosemite Clean has dialed in what their offtake is and where it's going in. I will say, going back there, feedstock wise, this is a larger plant. It's about a $160 million project, and they take in about 105,000 tons a day. So that's a little over double of what SGH2 does. Next slide. This is just kind of what I talked about before. What I've been trying to do is make sure that the Fire Safe Council is the community liaison with a lot of these different organizations. I've made sure that they've connected to both Butte County, the town of Paradise, city of Oroville, let them know what kind of the local climate is of how we can move forward and help them. Also try to leverage the Fire Safe Council to be a 5% owner in some capacity, whether it's a partnership or something, so that whatever material that they are bringing in and making, that we get some of the money. So we are always having some type of funding for the Fire Safe Council that's not tied to a grant. And then also to be able to get paid for the feedstock from our projects. If we can get a bone dry ton price for some of our projects, we could, that would help pay for the projects and make our dollars that we move forward. So if the Fire Safe Council was able to bring material in for both facilities, it's about 147,000 bone dry tons a year, which is quite a lot. That equals, based on some of the projects that we're doing, between 73 and 9,800 acres of forest fuel reduction a year. We've kind of figured out, using that WUI action plan, we need to be treating based on the fire and return level of about 60,000 acres. So that's, we're not there yet. It's like a little over 10%. So we wouldn't be able to do all of that. We don't have the capacity to do that. So that's where they're looking at these other feedstock suppliers to be able to bring material to them. But it definitely starts to make a dent in some of the things that we want to do as a Fire Safe Council and to make our communities fire safe. And the idea of being partners in this is so that we can do, all the other things that we help support in our community: fuel reduction projects, prescribed fire, biochar, evacuation routes, home hardening, education, and recovery. Next slide. That's it. If there's any questions, I'll look at the chat real quick. You can reach me either by phone, email, and I have more information for both of these projects that I can share with people. If you just let me know, I can give some of that information to you. So the material, the question is, will this logs be stored on site? Some of the material will be, but based on our projects, that's where we would get our material from. One of the problems that we have is, how long does the wood store? How long can we store the wood? So that's part of what we're trying to figure out. working with the companies to come up with good solutions to how we manage all the logs that we have. That's all I have. If anybody has any more questions, I will pass it on to who's next.
Hey, Jim, we've got a question from Wolfie asking, will the facilities consume water? And do either facilities create biochar? The second question.
Yeah, so neither facility will create a biochar. There is some ash involved in a Yosemite Cleans project. In SGH2's project, there's what they call a slag. If you can imagine what a plasma torch, like a cutting torch uses, there's a little bit of metal that comes out of that. That metal can be stored and used and added to other projects like concrete. It can be mixed into concrete. It does capture carbon at the same time, so there is some ways to do that. The products do consume water. That's one of the things we looked at, but we made sure that the water that they consume, they're recycling. You know, they have a cooling process that they need to use for their material. That water will be recycled. So there is a little bit of water that's consumed, but they're recycling most everything that they have. I think that's it. Thank you. I appreciate your time and keep moving forward.
Okay, my name is Jeff Gould and I'll be discussing some grazing. Jim, thank you for that excellent presentation.
Hey, Jeff.
Biomass.
Wolfie's up next.
Oh, sorry.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, thanks, Taylor. And thanks, Jim, for that awesome presentation. I'm Wolfie with the Butte County Resource Conservation District and the Butte Prescribed Burn Association. And I've been asked to talk about some of the good fire that we have in our future, some achievements that we've had in this past year as a community, and some that we expect next year. And as we go through some of those achievements, I'm going to link each slide to one of the 9 key goals in the state of California's recently released Prescribed Fire, Cultural Fire, and Wildland Fire Use Plan. We can go ahead. Yeah, so just a couple of weeks ago, here in Butte County, we had the largest TREX ever. A TREX stands for Training Exchange. It's a prescribed fire training exchange where people come together just to learn more prescribed fire skills. And this links to the state's goal to develop a robust prescribed fire workforce. The need that our forests have for good fire is so huge, and the need that that fire has for qualified people to put it on the ground is equally huge. Those qualifications can come at all different levels. So we, through this TREX, we qualified, I think about 50, maybe 60 new individuals in this county who hold red cards now. So they're able to join federal burns and help reduce the backlog of pile burning and underburning on our Forest Service and BLM lands, which is great. But a lot of people who participated in TREX don't have a red card and may never pursue those formal qualifications. They may be landowners or community volunteers who want to help put good fire on the 40% of Butte County that's owned by private non-industrial landowners, and that's really important too. So there was really something for everyone. Next slide. And to that end, now that TREX is behind us, we are considering pretty much the whole winter to be an on-call burn window when conditions are right for us to meet our ecological objectives with burns. We have a ton of burns planned out across Butte County, both on private lands, at the reserve, and on federal lands. There are some going on as we speak out by Little Grass Valley Reservoir, and at the reserve, folks are burning. You can expect to see smoke. Please know that we're working with Campfire and the Air Quality Management District to make sure that these burns don't have public health impacts. I chose a picture of Don Hankins for this slide. Here he is applying some good fire to a meadow right at Greenup at the Butte County, the Big Chico Creek Ecological Reserve to reduce invasive weeds and enhance the native grasses. One of the goals in the California Prescribed Fire Strategic Plan is to expand cultural burning. And I love talking to Don Hankins and learning from him, because he always reminds me that good fire isn't just about fuels reduction. It's also about us humans using fire as a tool to fulfill a responsibility that we have to all the other species that we share this fire adapted landscape with. We can use it to benefit everyone that we share this ecosystem with. And cultural burning is all about that. And it can take place on the scale of a single clump of deer grass at a time. And it can take place on a scale that's maybe thousands of acres of a subwatershed. And it's all important in repaying the fire debt that we owe to the land. Next slide. Speaking of fire at all different scales, one of those scales where we need good fire is very, very big. So here are some projects that CAL FIRE is working on here in Butte County to do some prescribed fire projects that may approach more of a landscape scale. Not that these multi-thousand acre projects would necessarily all get burned off on one day. But CAL FIRE has multiple VMPs that they're developing across the county. We just heard about one in Southern Paradise. There's one up in Cohasset where CAL FIRE burned, I think, about 600 acres just a week or two ago, which was awesome. Here we have pictures of one in Big Chico Creek Canyon. In the middle, there's a not a VMP, but a cross-boundary burn project going on in and around Flea Valley, north of Concow. And then over here, there's a big project around the Phoenix area. They call it the Phoenix VMP in the old Wildfire footprint. These are just the pictures. These are just the projects I have pictures of because my organization, the Butte RCD, is playing a supportive role in helping CAL FIRE with environmental permitting on each of these projects. But they're really diverse. Like over here in Big Chico Creek Canyon, there are areas where the objective is to reintroduce fire to areas that haven't burned in multiple decades. And then in these other burns, fire is being reintroduced into areas that burned at high severity just 3 or 4 years ago. So those are both really important goals, and they support the state's goal to facilitate larger and strategically located burns. Next slide. No matter how big or small a burn is, we need to build public support for it. It needs to be something that the public understands and supports, both so that it can happen smoothly and also so that people can, in the future, step up and help with those burns themselves. So these are just some different snapshots from social media of people being really supportive of prescribed fires that have happened in their communities. I often hear experts tell me that since we've experienced traumatic events here in Butte County, people are traumatized and afraid of fire, and we should not bring up the need for good fire or expose them to prescribed fire projects. But research that the RCD has done, that the Fire Safe Council in cooperation with the town of Paradise has done, kind of shows us the opposite. People really do want to see the land maintained with fire in a safe way, and the support for it is really quite strong. I think that the best way to build public support for fire, especially with people who are more hesitant around it, is to give as many people as possible a good experience with fire. And that's within reach. Next slide. The Butte Prescribed Burn Association is really just about giving ordinary people a safe and productive opportunity to engage with good fire. Most of us don't have a fire background. I certainly don't. And it's not like I had, parents and grandparents teaching me how to manage fire effectively. Most of us don't have that. But fire is a set of skills, and you can learn skills. So through the Prescribed Burn Association, it's just a group of neighbors who help each other put good fire on the ground, just the way that you would go out and help help your neighbors clear brush or stack firewood or something like that. It's always a mix of people with a lot of fire experience who are willing to serve as mentors and people who are beginners. We're literally ages 9 to 92. And when we're burning on private lands, there are no particular qualifications that you need to join us. There's no particular ability level. We will find a way for you to contribute, even if you might not be, the most physically fit person on the fire line. And we do require personal protective equipment for our burns to keep people safe, but it's probably equipment you already have in your closet or in your work shed. It's been a lot of fun. My goal for this year, and I think Ben had the same goal too. Here's a picture of Ben, who's such a great advocate for prescribed fire in Forest Ranch, and through your Fire Safe Council funding has been helping Forest Ranch residents plan good fire on their land on so many different parcels, which is really awesome. I think we both had the same goal this year, and we were talking about like our New Year's resolution. I just hope we can have one burn on private land and it goes really well and it sets a really good example. We've had 6 so far, and there's another one this Sunday. So next slide. You can come join us too. I don't have a lot more. I'm really grateful to the Fire Safe Council for how supportive they've been of the Prescribed Burn Association specifically, and also incorporating more prescribed fire into each additional grant that they write. I know that prescribed fire is a big part of or at least planning for it is a big part of the Campfire FMP or VMP as well. And I know that going forward, there's so many thinning projects that the Fire Safe Council has done that are going to need to be maintained with fire and with grazing. Those two things can kind of go hand in hand as well. So I look forward to burning with you.
Wolfie, thank you so much. What a wonderful presentation, and more than that, what terrific work. At this point, we're going to take some questions if anyone has some. Okay, we will continue to accept questions, but we will transition into Jeff's presentation.
So we had some objectives for our grazing program, and it was about developing something that we would be able to use on the ridge to manage many of our projects that were already underway and future projects. We wanted to be able to have a multi-year plan and be able to continue grazing into the future, and looking for opportunities to bring private landowners into the mix. If we can go to the next slide. We worked with our forester, Pete Sundahl, to create a grazing management plan. And the primary goal for grazing management plan is to establish sustainable fire-safe landscape that balances vegetation growth and removal to manage undesirable, invasive, flammable plant species. And Pete has worked really hard to put together a grazing management plan, which we hope to make available on the website soon for everybody. Part of the plan is a yearly treatment, and part of the yearly treatment process is about looking at what the animals eat, when they eat it best, and about making sure that we're getting rid of the fuels at the proper seeding time. So we want to try to make sure that the plants aren't really having an opportunity to reseed. Part of this is about what animals that we're using. Primarily here on the ridge, we're focused on goats, but we do have a percentage of sheep mixed into the mix. The sheep do an excellent job on the low grasses, and the goats do an excellent job with the shrubs and the poison oak and other species that we want to see eradicated or low amounts of them. Part of that process is about how we move around and when we move around the herd. And this is a slide from the management plan that we've developed. And you can see that we're looking at the topography, we're looking at the species, and we're looking at the weather and how we can best manage that here on the ridge. We have a pretty detailed plan that we've worked with our forester to design, and we hope to be able to implement it. A lot of that is going to come down to funding. The goal is to have 1,000 animals, and if we can do 100 acres a month, we're looking at approximately 1,200 acres a year. And we would hope that as we continue to do other fuel management projects, that we can maintain those projects, and in following years, we would hopefully be able to add more animals. This is a bit ambitious, but in the goal would be to try to add 1,000 animals a year to the point where we're able to have 3,000 animals grazing and approximately 3,600 acres. One of the keys is about creating some long-term contracts. Some of that is going to come down to funding and what funding we're using. We've been a little bit limited on what we have available to us right now because we really only have a couple grants that are focused, that have dollars set aside specifically for grazing. One of the recent successes we've had, or not so much, well, we've helped our local grazer get some other opportunities in and around the area. And recently they've been able to sign a long-term contract on the Grossman property in Forest Ranch. And they now will be grazing there year-round. These are the kinds of contracts and some of the goals that we have for grazing, is to try to bring other private landowners into the mix, because grant funding isn't enough by itself. We've had a lot of positive response from the goats from the community, and I think that that's one of the really huge successes of this grazing program so far. Landowner and community involvement is huge. As we see, as we look at the opportunity to help smaller landowners, we really need to be able to group them together and make larger sets of land that we can graze for it to be affordable. We've got many partners in this at this point. Paradise Unified School District has partnered up with us and been able to retreat some of their land. Paradise Pines Property Owners Association has worked with us to graze some of their land. And as we look forward to the VMP in Paradise, we hope to be able to partner up more with Paradise Parks and Rec and try to get many of their projects into the grazing program as well. We spoke a minute ago about the goal of 1,200 acres a year. It comes down to partnerships, grant funding, and private landowner participation. We have had huge success this last year with Paradise Unified and Paradise Pines Property Owners Association. They've followed up a second season of treatment, and on this season we were able to work out a cost share, which greatly increases the acres that we can cover with the current funding that we have. And the more that we can get landowners to participate with funds, the farther we can stretch the grazing opportunity for everybody. One other thing as far as the funding, just to back up for a second, is events and other donations that we're looking to get. We have on the slate an annual grazing festival that we would like to see happen, and that's going to provide a really great opportunity to generate funds for more grazing. Some of the no, go back or forward one more, sorry. So this is a map of Blue Oak, which many of you might have seen the goats as you came up the Skyway off to the right, just as you're getting close to Paradise. And this is was a 109-acre project that we were able to graze. And we look forward to getting back to that area possibly this next season and do some more grazing. If you look at the next slide, you'll see the effects of what the goats were able to do there. And it's pretty remarkable. It was a really nice project that we were able to work into the program. This is a picture of the goats on West Branch on the McNally property. And we did, what was it, 54 acres there. And that was really a successful project as well as it was a great place to have an event, and the news media and other things came out and really helped promote grazing. The next slide will show the Paradise Pines greenbelt fingers. Obviously, the lower part of the map was really devastated by the fire, and it's been a great opportunity for us to get in there and do some management of those areas. One of the great positives there is that as these greenbelt fingers lined so many private homes, the grazer was able to work with landowners to actually graze some of those private properties as well. Many of them don't have homes at this point, but they still have the requirement to take care of their land. And so it was a really great, affordable way for us to help them get their areas de-weeded and other fuel reduction going on there. This next slide, you can see is part of that same Paradise Pines grazing. And it's really a great picture of what we see in terms of before and after. The Pines has been a really great partner, and we really look forward to working with them in the following seasons. As we move forward, we're really looking at how to best use grazing as a part of the action plan. And working with Campfire, we've really come up with an objective of just trying to follow up treatment of projects that we've already completed as a part of the action plan, and looking to maintain them and keep the fuels reduced so that we're not coming back in and having to do large scale projects again. We'd also love the idea of just the reintroduction of this historic tool and trying to make the most of it. It's been great for the public, and everybody seems to enjoy seeing them. We do have some escapes once in a while, and luckily everybody's been really positive about those. And if you've at all followed any of this on Facebook, you can see that there's just a lot of support for grazing. One of the great things that we've seen with the grazing as well is our ability to work on high risk red flag days. So much of our work is stopped because of those high risk days. And the goats are just really a great, safe, effective tool as we're in those really hot, windy summer days. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and I'll do my best to try and answer whatever you guys would like to know.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Fantastic. And we have a pending question about a goat logo as well. So you may see that coming in the new year. At this point, pending questions, we will transition to Chief Garrett Scholen's presentation. And Chief, we look forward to your introduction and what we can learn about the Dixie Fire that we might be able to replicate here in Butte and other things that are important for us to understand. Thanks so much.
Sure, absolutely. I'm going to go through trying to share my screen here with the PowerPoint. All right, it should be up if somebody could let me know if they're seeing it.
Yep, it's good.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So my name's Garrett Scholen, North Division Chief here in Butte County, as well as the Town of Paradise Fire Chief. And with me today that I will reference if they have comment is Chief Gus Boston, our VMP and Fuels Battalion Chief for our unit, and Chief Dave Derby, our Forester. So they're both online as well if there's any questions for either of those folks. So today, just talking a little bit about the Dixie Fire. I'm not going to obviously go through the whole incident. It's almost 1 million acres, but really focusing in on the portion of Butte County and what was successful and why things may have turned out the way they did on the early part of the fire. So I think everyone's fairly familiar with the fire history here in Butte County, but to bring everybody up to speed, if you haven't seen this map before, the purple, if you will, indicates the burn scar from the Campfire. The blue hue is overlay of the North Complex, and then of course the red is the latest with the Dixie Fire. So we're obviously very concerned with the parts of Butte County that haven't burned, which is roughly 125 to 150,000 acres here in the north part of the county, which is primed to burn. You could see just outside our county limits into Tehama County, we have the remnants of the Campbell Fire that burned in this area that is ripe to repeat itself. So we have a lot of concern as how that's creeped in before into Butte County and the communities of Cohasset and such. And then of course, looking at our South County, not ignoring what's going on down there. The Wildfire is ready to burn. It's a different fuel type than we're looking at in the north part of the county. We're looking at more of a fast moving fire that's got a lot of dead and down that could be supported. And of course, the intermix of the WUI around there is a huge concern of ours as well. So we are paying attention to these, and we appreciate the work going on with the fire safe councils and everyone else that's involved. The PBA, although mostly the events are happening in the north part of the county, we're hoping to see more and more of this work out with them, with folks engaging in the south part of the county as we move into the spring times in those areas that would allow them to do some burning as well. So appreciate working with all of you. So today we're just going to talk a little bit about the first 72 hours of the fire. And this isn't a long presentation. It's kind of tied into fuel reduction and what was successful for us. Although we know the fire went beyond this and created a lot of havoc out there, but there was a success story that did happen in this part of the Feather River Canyon and that we are going to build upon. So here's the progression of the first 72 hours, roughly 2,000 acres. The first day, almost 5,000 the second, and then another 3,000 the third day. And as a reference here, if you can see my mouse, this is the Rock Creek drainage in here in this area. So on the second day, it blew well through the Rock Creek drainage and then up into the plateau, if you will, heading up and towards the Chester area, if you will. So to back up, into 2020, we had the North Complex fire, and as things begin to wind down in the West Zone, which CAL FIRE was in command of, the incident was turned back over to the unit. And so we had some concern still with the East Zone progression of the fire as it moved down into the Feather River Canyon. You can see this was the one of the final maps drawn before things begin to be blacklined and contained. And this fire had backed very well down into the canyon. We had some concern with an eastern wind push if it did happen, and it crossing over into the north side, if you will, of the Feather River. So we capitalized on the opportunity to work with SPI, PG&E, and staying within the CAL FIRE boundaries, the direct protection boundaries, to start essentially from Flea Valley and build a contingency line up along utilizing the power lines and some of the fuel breaks that were identified through SPI up into the high country. So I'm going to play this video. It starts at Flea Valley and it works its way up into the High Lakes, and just talk a little bit about this. So it wasn't without pushback when we started this project from both our own agency as well as others. They felt maybe it was not necessary, but Campfire took it upon themselves to fund this as part of the incident. And we deployed about 44 pieces of equipment over roughly a 2-week period to build this line. There was a lot of planning that went into it. It was exhaustive. There was backtracking and re-engaging to try to use the landscape, as you'll see here, a lot of granite and fuel breaks through SPI to try to tie all of this in. And I'd like to go ahead and pause myself at this point and open it up to Chief Gus Boston to add in some comments. As you can see, we call this the Boston line, and Gus was the branch in charge of this, working for me, that really put this plan together. And I want to provide him an opportunity to talk about it a little bit. Gus.
And like Chief Sholem was pointing out, is that we were using the landscape as well as using some private lands and federal lands to be able to maintain that fuel break throughout. So this was definitely a critical piece during the initial phase of the Dixie. So within the canyon wall down towards the creek. The piece that we weren't able to capture is the fire progression throughout the first 5 operational periods that outpaced us moving up canyon just due to conditions and fuel conditions and weather conditions. But it was able to stay intact, and the resources had a safe opportunity to anchor, flank, and hold along the canyon wall, which saved a lot of timber value and communities to the north and northwest of that fuel break system. So it was extremely challenging ground logistically to support that fuel break, but we were able to get it in place, like Chief Sholem pointed out, within a couple weeks. So we're hoping in the future that it will continue to be maintained and be a strategic plan for the unit, and as well as U.S. Forest Service, and provide that anchor point.
So to add on to Chief Boston, we're also, now that we've had the fire, one thing we weren't able to complete was how do we tie this back in? And there's the end of the line right there. We basically rocked out into the High Lakes. So that's looking back down the canyon wall there. So how do we tie this back down into the canyon? So when we have these fires in this area in the future, that we have a pre-plan, if you will, to engage and be successful. And I'll show you here on the next slide, if it'll get it to go ahead on me. There it is. So here's a picture of that 3-day progression of the fire, and then of course you can see the completed line. So it held for the most part within the line we developed. Our challenge was, how do we tie this now, future, working with the landowners, back into Highway 70 somehow in a few places, so that we have predetermined areas that we can work from, because it's obvious that this has and will continue to be a huge challenge for anyone that has a fire, whether it's Cal Fire, Forest Service, or whomever in this canyon. So we're working on that plan. We haven't quite finished that development on it, but that's our next phase. So we think this will be, for future generations, a huge positive. And of course, going back towards Concal, and that way there's a whole nother plan being developed post Campfire that will tie into this as well. So we're really focusing on the next generations having opportunity to hold on to this fire. So we'll open it up to discussion. As I said, all 3 of us are here now. If there's any questions from Cal Fire you have, either on this or anything else, but we'll continue working with our partners on this to have strategies and effective fuel breaks. We know this is on a large land scale. Not everybody in their communities wants to see 6 dozer blade wide line around their communities, but I will say that it was extremely effective for the fire behavior in this particular case. And we really are focusing on the maintenance part of it, and was really happy to hear the conversations happening about that today, and employing grazing as part of that, goats, working with cattle ranchers on that part as well. And then we also want to be sure people are embracing and looking at herbicidal application as well. It's not the answer for everything, but there is a place that it probably needs to be employed, and it has been found to be effective across the landscape. So we'll open it for questions. That's the end of our presentation. Thank you.
We do have a question from Jim. Will this be used to anchor prescribed fires in the future?
I think it has the potential for that. We don't have any in that specific footprint that we showed identified. However, if you look back towards the west, from there is some concow burn, prescribed fire burning in that area coming out of the Polga drainage up on top on the west side of Flea Valley.
And are there any stats on mortality rate within the Dixie footprint?
That information, I still had some preliminary information when I pulled that up the other day from the FTP site. So I haven't dove into that. There is, believe it or not, I expected to see more mortality across the landscape of this fire. There are some significant pockets, and when we look at Butte County, those significant pockets were unfortunately up in the Butte Meadows area. If any of you went up there Christmas tree driving or anything, you may have seen some of those. So there are some, and those maps are beginning to come out and available.
Does CAL FIRE have lookouts?
As far as fire lookouts, is that, I presume, what they're talking about? So like Sawmill Peak or Bald Mountain lookouts. So we still have a number of facilities scattered throughout in the state and in Butte County. Those towers are still up, and we've employed the Alert Wildfire system on our towers, and that is our monitoring system that's in our command center, as well as it being public facing to all of you that wish to view it. We have the ability to control the cameras, to look at specific locations. We also have ability now to zoom in and get lat and longs. So that is how we're employing the use of our lookouts. If we run into a lightning situation, we will look at staffing strategically a lookout for that time frame with a person. All right. There's no other questions. I think we're good. Thank you very much for everyone.
All right, thank you so much, everybody. At this point, we're going to do our conclusion. And I have a quick screen share here. We can get to the right one in just a second. Can everyone see that? Okay, thank you so much. Just 1 second. I'm having trouble with my screen. Okay, there we go. All right, so we hope in the new year to kick off our tradition of forest health tours. That's been just a nice experience to meet out in the field and look at these projects and get collaboration together. We also hope to have our Adoptive Forest Days again. There isn't a particular alliance of partners to do that yet, but we look forward to seeing what we can do in the spirit of helping our national forests. Also, just a reminder that typically the first week of May is Wildfire Awareness, and we'll be looking forward to that. In summary, for the committees we discussed today, if you are interested to get involved with one of these, again, they are only once a month. So the Grazing Committee that Jeff talked about, Jim and his Biomass Forest Health Working Group, the Firewise and Fire Safe Committee that Lauren leads. We no longer have the Bear Fire Recovery meeting, but we do have the Youth Education Committee that's for now Northern California. And of course, you can stay in touch as a member as well. Other ways that we'd love to be in touch with you, please feel free to join one of our board meetings. They are the first Wednesday of each month. Currently, they're held by Zoom. Also, lots of information being posted on the website all the time the social medias that we have access to. And if you're interested, we can always set up a standing meeting if we're not keeping in touch enough. So with that, I would like to thank all of our speakers, thank all of the guests out there, all the agencies and partnerships that are represented today. I'm wishing you all a wonderful holiday and a great new year. Please stay in touch.